Hello, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Bower. I'm Ryan Steffen, Executive Director from Bower Center for the Arts, and we are here to inspire conversations, explore the arts in our community, and shine a spotlight on the amazing organizations and individuals that make Bedford such a vibrant place. So today, I have asked both Hedron McCormick and Lori Stetson to join me. If you are a local and a reader of the Bedford Bulletin, you may recognize Hedron's name, as her story "Look for Sharp Top" was featured on September 11th as one of the Bedford Get-Togethers installments of Our Bedford Stories. But the story also has a fun Bower connection. Her fiance Adam found this piece so moving that he wanted to do something special with it. So he came in and asked me if I knew of any artists who might do a commission piece for him. That is where Lori enters the picture. So I connected Adam and Lori, and the rest, as we say, was magic. So we'll start with you, Hedron. Hello.
Yeah. Hi.
So tell us just a little bit about yourself.
So I am originally from Bedford, moved to Florida for about 20 years and have been back for about a year. I'm a mom of 3 grown children and also an esthetician of 20 years with an office here in Bedford.
And I realize that this is a podcast, so you cannot see her, but a funny story about Hedron. Many of you know I used to be a bartender at Beals, and I legitimately ID'd her because I thought she was underage.
It's true.
So it is odd that you say you have adult children when I really didn't think you were of age to drink. So
yes.
You still look that great. It's speaking for your business for sure.
Thank you.
So let me ask, you said, I know you moved to Bedford when you were young. What brought your family here?
My dad was a physical therapist at the Bedford Hospital for 30 years and retired. So we came to Bedford for Bedford Hospital.
Okay. And I know lots of people who grow up in small towns can't wait to get out of them.
Yes.
Were you of that mentality?
I was for a while.
Okay.
You know, of course, just like every teenager in Bedford, there's not a lot to do. But once I started having children and became a mom, I started looking at Bedford differently as a place to raise my children.
Absolutely. A place to come back home, which is clearly what your story's about. We'll get into that part in a minute here. What took you to Florida?
So my husband at the time was anxious to move to Southwest Florida, where his former in-laws were living at the time. I was obviously reluctant to go, and kind of went kicking and screaming all the way to Florida. But, you know, I'm lucky to be able to say my children had wonderful childhood. They grew up in a very diverse area, which was important to me. So I tried to focus on the positive things that Southwest Florida offered my children, maybe that they wouldn't have received here. Different opportunities for schools and friends and just that diverse community that was important to me at the time when I was raising children.
Sure. I think you hit on a really interesting thing, which is it's nice to give your kids something different.
Yes.
But also know that they have a place to come to. So I'm sure they visit you here.
Yes, they do. And it was important for me as I was raising them to come back to Bedford. And so all 3 of them were born here. 2 in Lynchburg, and then my son was born at Bedford Hospital.
Okay.
So I'd like to think that this is home for them, but, so it was always important to me for them to know Bedford, because it was important to me.
Sure. So speaking of home, that's the subject of your story. You came back home.
Yeah.
What brought you back?
I think I always wanted some sort of comfort that I never found in Southwest Florida. I have lifelong friends here. This just always felt like home. I always felt like I was on a permanent vacation when I was living in Florida. And 2, when you live in a bigger city, you long for simplicity. I was over the traffic. I was over the amount of people and the crowds, and honestly, it was always my plan to come back at some point, with or without my husband, and I came back without him. So,
Okay. Yeah.
yes.
What is it about Bedford that you love?
I think just that it's kind of frozen in time, and you just don't find that a lot anymore. That people honestly care about each other, are willing to help each other, and you just don't really find that anymore. You can pick up the phone and call anybody for anything, and they will still show up for you.
Yeah.
And so just I had missed that. And that's one of my favorite things about coming back is just being able to call someone to meet me for a coffee or just for a talk or a visit. And so it's always been a place of comfort to me.
Yeah. It's interesting. You nailed down that Bedford feels like home. And it is my home. I've only been here for 4 years now, but I have seen those exact same things. People are always friendly. People are always willing to drop anything and have a conversation or have a coffee. I've felt welcomed in this town since I moved here. And I think it's a really wonderful, unique thing about this area and about Bedford in general is that everybody treats you a little bit like your family, even if you're new family.
It's very true.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the piece that you wrote. Let's start with what made you write it?
So it was more or less a journal entry, and it's a very short story. It was something that kind of always echoed in my mind. I remember, in my story, my mother saying, just look for Sharp Top. And that was before cell phones and internet. It was kind of like back in the day where the streetlights come on, you know when to go home. And so not just for me, but for friends that I grew up with, Sharp Top was always that. You're driving on 460 and you see it off in the distance, you're almost home. Or you're on 221 and come around that curve and there it is, you're almost home. So that was kind of a gauge for me as a child before GPS that I'm almost home.
You're almost home. Yeah.
Yes. And so then it kind of came full circle and it kind of always rang true in my mind, to always return home, always look for Sharp Top. And I always did. And I always found that comfort, whether, I was 15, 25, 52. It was always that feeling of I'm almost home and now I am home.
Yeah. And one of my favorite lines in that piece, as I was reading, it was talking about how things change and things stay the same. That things that Bedford has changed, but the peaks have not.
Right.
And clearly that's a metaphor for everything. What do you feel like in Bedford has changed and what do you feel like has stayed the same?
I really feel like not a lot has changed. Of course, it depends on who you ask. But when I come back, of course, there's more people living here. There's more businesses. But I think it's all good things. But the people of Bedford are very protective of Bedford.
Yes.
What's going to come in, what's going out. You just can't throw up a business in Bedford. So I think that's why it stayed the same, is because it can be challenging to start a new business, which, I have done. And it has been tricky for me. I'm fortunate that I do know a lot of people in this community and I have a lot of support in this community. But, meeting new people, it can be a little bit tough. I mean, you're pretty much still a newbie in this area. So, winning people over can be a little bit challenging. Yeah. So I think, it's a good thing and maybe not such a good thing that it hasn't changed a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you always been a writer?
Not really. I wouldn't say that I'm a writer. I have thoughts sometimes that I'll just write down and then more thoughts to add to that thought. And next thing you know, I've got a paragraph or two. And I think with this story in particular, it just resonated with so many people about coming back home. I have friends that I grew up with who have a similar story. Divorce happens and we seek comfort during that time. And so we come back and we look for things and people for comfort. And I know that that's what I did. And I do have friends that have a similar story.
Yeah.
So it might be a private little journal entry just for me. But this one was different because I knew it resonated with so many people. My story was very similar to a lot of people who have circled back and come full circle and have come back home.
Right. That resonance is clear both by Bedford Get Together featuring that story.
Right.
And I'm going to have to mention Adam now.
Yeah.
And your new fiance.
Yes.
Also found this piece super moving.
He did.
And I remember him coming into the Bauer Center. I was sitting at the front desk and he's like, I have this piece that my girlfriend wrote, and I really want to create something with this. I want a piece of art that can accompany it. Do you know anybody that does that? And this is where I get to talk to you now, Lori, because when he said that and he was talking about what the piece meant, what it was about, I was like, I know the exact artist who might be the right person to connect him to. So Lori, welcome. I didn't mean to not include you in the first half of this. So Lori, start first by telling us about your interaction with Adam. What happened? Because I was not there. I made the connection, but you all met outside of that. So tell us a little bit about that time that you met.
Like a lot of people that I used to do all commission work, and I don't do a lot of it anymore because it has to be something challenging or there has to be a puzzle to it for me to solve. And when Adam came in, he had this great idea, but he wasn't sure how to ask to put it together. And as I listened to him and I read the piece, and then I started asking him questions, and as he started talking a little bit more about the piece and also about you, it clicked for me, and I just started sketching and asking more questions. And it like when somebody comes in and wants a commission, it either works or it doesn't. We're either on the same page or we're not. And it was, as I was sketching, he was, yes, that's what I want. But he didn't know how to ask. He didn't know how to say what he wanted, but he knew it when he saw it.
Okay.
So, yeah, we had a really good first meeting, and we were both really clear on what he wanted when he left, and it was just a fun piece to do.
Yeah. So most people in Bedford know you and know your art and know your style, but not all of our listeners are from the Bedford area. Can you tell us a little bit about your own background, your own art background?
I was lucky enough to get the gene that transfers what you see, from your eye to your brain to your hand. So I've always been called an artist. I did a lot of animal portraits when I was younger because there wasn't anybody else doing them in the area. And I worked for a vet for 40 years, so I had a lot of contacts. But I just hit a point where I had things inside I wanted to get out. And I was getting very bored with the portraits. And I just started doing some things that scared me.
Like
and
what?
I not having a perfect photograph to follow, trying to get what was in my head out on paper instead of looking at something. It's like trying to describe a dream. When you have a really vivid dream and it makes perfect sense at the time, and then you go and you start telling it to somebody else, and as you're going, you realize that there are so many things about it that keep shifting and changing, and you can't get across to somebody. And that's, I think, getting a good piece out is almost like doing that. You have the idea, but then Sometimes some ideas I have, I start the piece and it comes out exactly the way I envisioned it. Other pieces, whether they're sculpture or painting, I start out with one idea and the piece starts changing the story as I go. And I can either keep pulling it back to what I wanted, or I can let it pull me in the direction it's going. Those always turn out to be much better. I have to just let go and stop fighting stuff and trying to keep control of it.
When I look at your work, there's a definite dominant theme of both animals and nature, which when Adam was looking for what he was looking for, he was talking about this natural setting and trying to find the best he could describe it is a painting of the peaks, but not like everybody else's painting of the peaks.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And I knew that you like to approach some challenges that way. And I also knew that you really love working with the outdoors. In animals that are in the outdoors. At least when I peek into your studio, Lori is one of our resident studio artists at the Bauer Center. When I peek into her studio, those are the things that I see on your easel and against the wall. Is the stuff that you like to that's what you explore. Is there anything else outside of animals and nature that you like to dabble in?
It's more the medium.
Okay.
I love to paint in oils, but I also paint in acrylics. I love to do wire sculpture, but I'm also starting to work with some clay. Basically just challenging myself to try new things. And I think a good artist has a full trash can. Sometimes you try things and they don't work out, but you've got to try them and learn from your failures just as much as you learn from your successes.
Yeah.
And this was an interesting one because it doing the calligraphy for it was that the painting just rolled off because I could connect with the story. I could connect with what Adam was describing. And the more I went over the words in the story, the more I got to know Hedron. I got into your head where you were when you wrote it, which was really interesting because I've never had that happen before.
Yeah.
But it was just a really interesting piece to have come together that way. So when I met her, it was like, well, of course.
Yeah. And she said, I have so many things to ask you.
So let us in. Tell us about that meeting. Because I wasn't there. I'd love to know, how did that go? What did you guys talk about? You felt like you knew her, but you didn't know her. And you didn't even know it was happening.
I didn't. So it was a total surprise all of these months. And he would throw out little hints here and there. So I knew there was a project happening. But I didn't know it had anything to do with my story. He just talked about this surprise that was being worked on. So, I had no clue, but the Sunday came and he said, we're going to go pick it up. So I didn't know what I was ready for. I didn't know how long I was going. I packed a bag for the afternoon. And then we pulled into the Bauer Center after I was like, okay, where are we going? So he leads me up to her studio and I walked in and it was right there on the easel and it was beautiful and perfect. And I was so surprised and, to see the words that I had written, which is imperfect. Because I am not a professional writer. Like I said, it started with a journal entry, little words here and there that I would add to. And then, then seeing the words on this beautiful painting and it come together, it's a gift like I've never had before. So it was so special. All of the thought that Adam put into it. And
he's a keeper.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
For him to come up with that was such an amazing.
Yeah. And
idea.
He had that vision, he told me, and he just, when he met Lori and then they were able to communicate on this project together without really communicating. He said that he just knew instantly that she was the one to do this project. So I was so happy and I was so surprised, and it's beautiful, and I'll have it forever. And so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It was such a pleasure to do, and he was so excited about it.
Yeah.
And it was such a neat, thoughtful, original idea. I'm not anxious to do that much calligraphy again for a while.
Yeah.
that was the difficult part of the painting. But he told me you just couldn't wait, so he was going to give it to her.
I know.
He couldn't wait.
Right. So my birthday is in November, and it was supposed to be a birthday gift, and I knew there was something in the works. I didn't know what. I mean, he came up with all these crazy ideas that it could be. I probably would have bugged him to death. So,
well, he was
anxious too.
Yeah.
Okay.
He wouldn't have made it till November.
Yeah, no. And it just, I mean, coming from him, it just meant so much that he had put so much thought into it, and that my story meant a lot to him. Just made the project so much sweeter that it touched him in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I could just listen to you two talk for a long
Yeah.
time. I'm also looking at my clock and thinking we've now got to wrap this all up.
Okay.
So thank you both, Hedron and Lori. This collaboration, though Hedron didn't know it was going to be a collaboration, is a beautiful blending of both art, the art of writing, and the art of painting. And as some of you may know, I was an English teacher and theater teacher for over 20 years. So in my time, I often encouraged my English students, to view writing through the lens of art, to see that their words were their medium and their text was their piece. And I would teach my theater students that it was their duty to artistically bring to life the words and vision of a playwright. And in fact, the two worlds are very, very similar. Writing and painting are both arts. You said you didn't feel like you were a writer, but you were most certainly a writer, and you are an artist.
Thank you.
All of that being said, I have one last question that I'd love to end my podcast with, and that is to each of you. Why do you think art is important today?
Lori can probably answer this better than I can.
Because you can not always express things in words. Sometimes words aren't enough to get across the true meaning or the true feeling behind it. And art, painting, sculpture, dance, theater, they force you to present it more than just the words. And like when I I said I got to know Hedron so well. I think it happens with writing too, but it's between the lines. The words are there, but if you really get into a good piece, you get so much more out of it than just what the words say. And I think there has to be a way. We're called to get out things that you couldn't just rattle something off and get across to somebody in just that manner.
And I'm going to guess, while you said you got to know Hedron through her writing and through her piece, I'm assuming the more you look at the piece, the more you feel like you're getting to know Lori.
It's true. And every day it's hanging in our home. We look at it every day. We appreciate it every day. And when you had mentioned the calligraphy and it being difficult for you. And so I do, I noticed that a little bit more, and I appreciate all of the hard work that you did, because I know that part wasn't easy for you. So, but it's beautiful in our home, and like I said, we'll have it forever.
Yeah. So can I come back to you? Why do you think art is important?
I feel like in writing short stories or journal entries, if you wanted to know that part of it, is more just kind of expression of who you are. This was super personal to me, and I started writing it long time ago and kind of added to it and added to it. But it's a way that people can know me on a little bit of a deeper level than just meeting me or sitting down and having coffee. You know, they've read my story and feel like they know me on a different level now. And two, I think it's important as I shared it with my children. You know, they know me as mom and a whole other person. So with sharing it with my 3 adult children, they're going, oh, this is my mom too. And being able to share that part of me, especially with my children, has been important to me.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So it is time for us to wrap up. Thank you again so much, Lori. Thank you, Hedron, for meeting me and talking about this. I don't know that a lot of people know about commissions or how they even work. So it's fun to let some of our guests hear about how some of those even come to happen. So I'm going to just remind you about a few things that we do have still coming up at Bauer Center for the Arts. On October 11th, we have Opera on the James here for our Cab Kids Free Family Art Day. That's going to start at noon with crafts afterward. And then the big band of the Blue Ridge will take the stage that evening with their concert at 6 p.m. The annual fundraiser, The Art of Pairing Martinis and Moonshine, is coming up on October 18th. It's going to feature the music of Last Call Party Band, has a moonshine tasting, a cocktail menu, gourmet mac and cheese and build your own slider buffet, and a silent auction that pairs original art with bottles of wine and spirits. This year, we're going to feature an early entry VIP ticket that gets you all kinds of extra perks. It's going to be a little classy and it's going to be a little country, so you can pull out your rhinestones and your cowboy boots and join us at the Bauer on October 18th. And the next Bauer After Hours will be our costumed Boo Bash and Karaoke, which will be on October 30th. That's just $10 admission charge, and come sing and dress up with us. And that's just what we have in October right now. Please feel free to visit our website, bowercenter.org, sign up for our newsletter, and follow us on Facebook to get all the details on our classes, events, programs, outreach initiatives, and exhibitions. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we will see you next week.